right, we got Zayde Wolf here, everybody. How's it going, man?
Hey, what's up?
So I was just about to tell you, and then I said, hey, might as well just let's jump on the call and talk about it. But I'm really excited to talk to you because I feel like you've done some huge things without a lot of support from like a major label and that sort of thing. So I'm
Yeah,
really
right.
interested in talking about everything you've done. I know you got your third full length on the way back at it, so we'll talk about that. But before we do, why don't you just take us all the way back and let us know how you got into music?
Yeah, totally. I started playing music and making music when I was very small. My mom and my dad, we had an old like rickety piano, and even when I was, 5 and 6 years old, they said I would just sit there and basically try to make things that sound like music. And
Wow.
I didn't, talking to them as an adult, I didn't necessarily really believe that they were telling me the truth. Every
Uh-huh.
every parent thinks their son or daughter sometimes is something very special, but I see it now in my own kids, and they are all they're especially my 6-year-old daughter will sit at the piano and literally make music. And so I can see that as part of the path now, starting really young with that. And I played in high school. I started a band with my two younger brothers, and my parents helped us out with that. And we used to go around and play um, youth groups, community centers, high schools, church gymnasiums, and all of that stuff. And we did that for a few years, and I got my first time to learn how to make an album during that process. Yes, it was very cool. And so during that, I was like, wow, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to learn how to record music, make music, and do that. And I was lucky enough to have a guy named Bruce Chandler who helped me out with our very first album when I was like 17.
Mm.
And he just let me experiment, just mess around, let me put my hands on everything, which, you kind of think in recording studios, the producer does this and the artist sits over here and doesn't get the touch, especially when they're super young. But
Yeah.
he let me do it and experiment, and that just created a fire in me to want to make music and write songs and stuff. So
How'd you and
yeah.
Bruce how'd you guys connect?
I'm gonna take a quick sip of water real
Yeah,
quick.
take as many as you need.
uh, um let's see. I think my brothers and I were playing a show at a local, it was actually an amusement park, like a small amusement park
Mm.
back home, which doesn't exist anymore. And they had like a stage, and there were 4 or 5 bands out there that night. And I think Bruce had worked with another one of the bands, and he approached us afterwards and asked if we wanted to record a song. And we were like, well, yeah, we want to record a song. So we scraped together the money we could scrape together at that point, and yeah, it kind of kicked it off from there. I saw him the last couple of years at ACL Fest. I went down there to see that show, and he lives in Austin now. So try to catch up with him when I see him.
Nice. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember I remember the first time getting into a studio with someone who kind of knew what they were doing with Pro Tools, and just
Yeah.
and they were like my age, and like, you know, early or mid to late teens or whatever. And just being like, wow, I could, like that looks like I could do that, like,
Yeah.
and hearing your story about how he was letting you tinker around, and it probably demystified it a little bit, like probably romanticized it still, but demystified it to the point where it sounded like you were like, hey, I want to do this. I could do this.
Yeah. And we didn't have a lot of tools then. This was like the late 90s at that
Mm,
point. And
right.
now what we can do at home and with samples and small recording rigs is incredible. I mean, of course, like Billie Eilish is like a big story among that sort of generation.
Sure. Sure.
So it's really special, and to see, for people to be able to make music with really without any limits, kind of the entry point. Now that wasn't the case. I remember the first time I was living in Illinois. That's where I'm from originally, the southern part of Illinois. So we would drive to Nashville about 2.5, 3 hours if we wanted to really cut anything in a proper studio. And I remember spending $1,200 on one day to be able to record drums on an album.
Right. Right.
It's
Yeah.
like, That was crazy. So yeah, so from kind of from there, my brothers and I played together for a few years. I started really loving the recording process to get to do it more. We recorded multiple songs together as a band, my brothers and I. And then I started driving down to Nashville more often, working with other up and coming music producers and learning how to songwrite, getting my hands more and more in the studio. And kind of along that way, I started a band called the October. This was back in like 2004, something like that. Yeah. And we did that for a while. And the first instance of it was kind of just me tinkering around. We put a band together around some songs that I wrote and recorded in the studio. And we did that for several years. And kind of during that process, I felt like I was actually starting to get a handle on some of the songwriting, some of the recording processes. Our album started to sound decent. And some of the other bands around started asking me to to cut records for them. So kind of during that period there, I started being able to cut my teeth on recording some stuff. I remember this so well, my first album that I ever produced was like a 22 song punk rock record that we cut in one day. three member, it was basically cut live. I think we came back and re-overdubbed some guitar and stuff, but cut it, mixed it all. I think we did it all of it in about 2.5 days or something like that.
Wow.
And I think I made $350.
Well, that's punk rock.
It was great too, man. I learned so much from that experience. Like, one of the main things in the studio is learning how to problem solve. And I think, putting yourself in the fire like that, you learn how to problem solve on some stuff. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the type of stuff that you were playing? Because I know you were saying you were playing for youth groups and that sort of stuff in high school. Were you playing like faith-based music, or was it just kind of music that was friendly to those sorts of crowds, or what kind of stuff were you playing in high school?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, at the time we would play in churches, and so we'd incorporate some of that stuff. But a lot of the places that we would play, or church gymnasiums and youth group stuff, like they would let us play Sugar Ray and Matchbox 20 songs too. They didn't care. Like it was kind of open. So we were kind of doing that. We were mixing in some of the songs that we wrote, and we would cover some songs, and it was kind of a mismatch for a while. And then probably about 21, when I could start playing in bars, it really kind of opened up the opportunities to do more things than kind of what we were limited to as a much more sort of PG sort of scene,
Right. So you start doing this producing stuff, and you just cut this punk rock record and learn a lot on that. So where do things go from there?
Yeah, I start cutting more things. My band, the October, is touring a lot. We are touring across the US independently, trying to get a record deal. When I come home from those trips, I try to cut songs or an album with another band if it's possible. At this point, my wife and I only been married a couple of years. We're living in Kentucky now, where she's from, and we're just trying to make that work. Touring life, married life, trying to find a way to make money, all these different things, right?
Right.
And so we did that for a while until about 2007. I was kind of like, I'm over the band thing. I don't really want to do this anymore. I think I'm just actually better at not trying to be a front man and a guitar player in a band. I'm not a great singer. I had all these sort of self-doubt things that kind of made me just want to quit more or less playing music. And I thought, I'm probably just better at helping other people make something sound cool and helping them, helping cast vision with them. So I hung up being a singer 2007 and started trying to record more. My wife and I in 2008 moved to Nashville with a couple $100 really. And I moved down to try to produce down here, which was very hard. Everyone in Nashville is so good, and we're also going through a huge change in the music industry in 2008, where iTunes is taking over everything. People aren't buying albums anymore. budgets for records are being chopped to pieces. No one's paying to produce a demo anymore. Like, it was difficult. It was very difficult. I produced for several years, and then also along that time I started another music company with a friend of mine named Paul Mabry, and it's a drum samples company. Yeah, it's called That Sound. We did that for multiple years until a couple of years ago we sold it to Splice, which is a big company in New York, and now we have a great partnership with those guys.
Yeah, see their ads all the time. They're
I'm
huge.
sure. Yeah, they're sure. And amazing company as well. Great core people. Couldn't say anything bad about those guys. Awesome team. So a short little side story there, but we
that's really interesting though, because I've never actually talked to somebody, at least in long form, about we were making samples, and it to like when you said it, it sounds like, if there's actually money to be made there, it sounds like a cool idea, because you're like, I got this recording studio, I got musicians coming in and out of here all the time.
Yeah.
Why don't we record some loops? And then and especially if you know how to make them sound cool or unique, and then let's sell these loops to people who don't have a drum studio or the means to record drums, or just people who want to tinker around with different samples. So was that kind of the mindset? Did you run into someone who was doing it and you were like, oh, I should do that? Or were you like, hey, we got the equipment, let's do it? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
That was around 2010, I think. I had just met Paul. My wife and his wife really hit it off, so we started hanging out. One night we were over at Paul's house. We were both actually I'd hired Paul to play drums on something I was producing, and when I was finished, I asked him if we could sample his kit because it was sounding really great. We were really pumped about it. So I had him play some stuff on it. A week or two later, I sent him the samples that I made and the things that I made from that. I was like, hey, use it for whatever you want, man. It's your kit.
Yeah.
And we were hanging out at his house one night, and he was talking about how good it sounded and how we thought there was sort of like a break in what was kind of needed out there in the sample world, at least with what we saw. There were some really kind of heavy metal drum samples and rock drum samples specifically made by Steven Slade at that time, which were very usable, but we thought that didn't really cover where our heart was in music at the time. So yeah, it was a very sort of organic situation where Paul and I meet. I hire him for something. I send him the samples. I sent those out to a few other producers, and they're like, where can we buy more of this? And so demand from some sort of local other producers that we knew, and mix engineers and artists, were kind of like, you guys have to figure out a way to turn this into a company, which we had no idea how to do. We stumbled through it for the first year or so. Then all of a sudden it kind of exploded with us, and to the point to where a few years in, we were like, we have to find another partner who knows way more about software and all these other things. And so we teamed up with Splice, and that's where we are right now.
Cool. Yeah, that's an awesome digression on your path. A little exploration and sampling. That's really cool. So you guys start making these samples, and then you get back to the producing realm. So tell us a little bit about that, because I know you're saying, hey, I felt like having these doubts. I didn't want to be so much of an artist myself and just producing other artists. But I know eventually you get back to it. So obviously, so tell us a little bit about how you bridged that gap.
It's accident mainly. I think it was sort of a very organic situation, kind of like with That Sound and the drum samples. I had been working with a couple of licensing companies out in Los Angeles who I was producing some bands, and they were getting a few synchronizations for some of the songs. And so those bands were seeing, an extra few $1,000s here and there, and they were excited. So I thought, well, I feel like I have the toolkit to make that, to do well in that. And I just need to find the right people to kind of like get involved and make a make a new band that will kind of work in that, or take a band and help them do better in that world. So I started writing songs for it. And at the time it didn't have a name. I was trying to find singers. I was trying to find band. I couldn't get anything to really line up the way that I was either liking, or it was just a little bit flaky. I had my voice on
Musicians
the recording.
flaky? Yeah.
You know, it's hard, you know, it just is hard to be a musician. Like, you're always trying to juggle 75 things, and it's like, well, I gotta go on this, and I gotta try this for a while, and I gotta try this for a while, and so flaky is probably not really the right word to use. More like overextended, maybe.
Well, maybe. I mean, that word gets thrown around all the time in Los Angeles, and especially with musicians. So by all means, use it.
Right. Yeah. So okay. So I'd written some of these songs, and I showed a couple of them to my wife, and she's like, "These are really great. You should finish these out. And just do it. You know, it's already like almost all the way there." So I did, and I sent a couple of the songs out to, one or two of the songs out to my friend Jessica, who runs Lyric House. Lyric House represents Zayde Wolf. At the time, I sent her a song. I didn't want her to know that it was me, because I already had a relationship with her as a producer. I wanted legitimate feedback, as this is a band thing.
Yeah.
So I put the name Zayde Wolf on it. I sent it over to Jess. She was like, "This is great. I have something I can pitch for this right now. Would you be cool if we did that, and we'll follow back up on paperwork?" So yeah, she sent it over immediately. It was a Fox for it was a spot for a show on Fox. It was coming on, a big promo spot for that.
Nice.
They wanted to use the song. It ended up being like a 10-week. Yeah, it was like a 10-week promo.
Wow.
And it was worth about 25 grand or something like that.
Wow.
So this lands, and I go and I tell my wife, I was like, "This spot just is 25 grand." And she's like, "You need to go back out in the studio and make more of these songs."
Yeah.
And Jess hits me up, and she's like, "So who's Zayde Wolf? We have to get more of these songs." And I was like, "Well, it's me." And she's like, "Get back in the studio and make more songs." So her and my wife like had a basically an echo of each other of, you know, get out there and get to work.
Yeah.
And that's really like the first tipping point for any of that. I think at that time I had maybe 3 songs, and a couple of the big ones like New Blood came a couple of months after that. And that's kind of how it got there.
That's such an awesome story. Like, and so so it sounds like you wrote these songs. You weren't like looking at sync briefs or anything like that. You were just like, these are cool sounding songs that could potentially, you thought they might have broad appeal for that realm. And then
correct.
And you were right, because one of them got picked up right away and used in kind of a main promotional campaign. Was this when you were writing, and maybe a little bit of both, was this the type of music that you were really passionate about? Or was it what you were seeing in sync and you were like, this could work? This was what I did for this band that was picking up some stuff. So or was it maybe a combination of both? Like, this is what I like, but it's also mixed with what I think would work.
Yeah, you know, I've always been sort of like an alternative rock and pop sort of, you know, singer, producer, writer. That's what I've always liked. I've done other things, but that's kind of where I gravitate to.
Right.
You know, I think right along that time, alt rock kind of changed a little bit with like Ex Ambassadors, Imagine Dragons, stuff like that changed to where things felt a little grittier, a little more soulful, a little heavier in places, but it wasn't like rock that we sort of heard it. It was a mixture of hip hop and soul and all of these things. And so I loved all of that stuff growing up. And so I was sort of doing that and trying to do that with some of the bands that we were already working on, because I could kind of see where like the zeitgeist of music was sort of turning.
Sure.
And so, yeah, it was just, that's just what felt great to me. I've always loved music like that. and yeah, it just kind of felt natural to do that.
Yeah, and so I feel like there's an overarching theme with a lot of your lyrics.
Hmm.
Do you tell us a little bit about that and where you get your inspiration from?
There's a bit of self story in there, some of my own story. There's a little bit of looking at um, great movies and great films that I love, and I sort of write within a character of Zayde Wolf. That's kind of what's unique about this. I get to kind of write in a character, um, and sports. I love sports, and so there's all this sort of mismatch of um, Michael Jordan and LeBron James meets up with alternative rock music, like as
Huh.
an idea, and cinematic stuff from Hans Zimmer, and it's like that's like the mismatch of the sound,
I love that.
So yeah, so I think there's a lot of lyrics in there that I kind of talk about, like kind of where I came from, which is a very small town in Illinois, and sort of always wanting to try to like go and do something really big beyond that town. I still love that place, but it just kind of felt like I just always wanted to do something big. I always, you know, I wanted to be a pro athlete, but I'm not good enough to do that for sure. But there's always that thing. I always wanted to do something really, really big with music, and I really or anything. And I think that um, the story is just kind of a gritty overcomer type thing. And so
Yeah.
there are some kind of the continual themes with that, and it kind of branches out from side to side. It's about a little more of this or a little more of that, but yeah, there is some theme in that. I want people to be encouraged. I get so
Exactly.
many messages from a couple of them that struck me. A mom reached out to me, autistic daughter. Um, she listens to the songs, and those songs are a part of their like regiment now, in order to keep her focused on things and doing well and staying positive and all of these type of things. There's some real special things out there that happen, I think, when you put positive energy out, you know. So
Yeah, and
um
that's exactly what I was talking about. Just you described what I was hearing. That just
mm,
the overcoming story, the
mhm,
the inspiring kind of lyrics. And yeah, and those are great for just for true inspiration, like you said, which is amazing. And also epic for what you're doing. Because I feel like that
yeah,
fits into so much of the world that you're working in. And for those who aren't familiar with your music, they may be familiar with your music and just not know it,
yeah,
because you have been in countless spots now. You've had, is it hundreds of syncs, would you say? Would you are you
yeah. I think I mean, yeah, it's literally hundreds at this point. It's well over 500, if not more than that. It's an insane number of spots and huge range of things, from usage with sports stuff to major commercials or ad campaigns and things inside TV shows, and yeah, just all kinds of awesome stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you went from just sending your friends some tracks that you did in the studio, and luckily one of them getting picked up right away, to where you just shoveling like tracks her way, being like, "Here's some more from Zayde Wolf," and her being like, "Good, because I got all these things to plug into them."
Kind of. So I mean, I didn't, at the beginning, you don't really know exactly what's going to happen. It could have been a fluke,
Yeah,
but it turned out very quickly that within the first few months, we had racked up a dozen or so licenses that were pretty significant. And then you kind of realize it kind of puts a little pressure on it, and you're like, all right, so this actually has to be something now, like
yeah,
it really has to be something. And so that sort of started talking about how to define the brand. You know, I never really wanted to be like famous singer. I just like to make music. And so I think Zayde Wolf it's kind of good for me as well, because it is kind of like it's just a moniker. it's a thing that I get to use and write with,
Right. Like
so
an alter ego kind of
yeah,
that
in
you
a
get
in
to
a
be.
way.
Yeah.
In a way, I don't think that I'm not quite as ballsy and outspoken as Zayde Wolf is, probably, as a person, as Dustin Burnett. You know what I mean?
Right. But I mean, I think even the average musician, everyone's kind of everyone's doing a performance,
Yeah, right.
but it's a cool story because you went from kind of leaving, being a performing artist or an artist who's creating music for himself, to, like you said, just kind of falling into it functionally, like, hey, this is working for these guys that I did, so maybe I'll do a couple of these myself, and then you
Mm-hmm.
become more successful in what you thought you couldn't do than you
Yeah.
ever were when you were actually trying, and
Yeah, yeah, it's been fun and life-changing, for sure, and also just a place to be imaginative now and try to push the boundaries of what Zayde Wolf is, or really even influence alternative music. I'll I'm it's never going to be as big as some of the bigger bands. I know that, and that's fine with me, but it's I love being a part of the whole thing, the whole story of rock and alternative music right now. It's fun.
yeah, and don't sell yourself short. You got millions of streams and millions
Yeah,
of monthly listeners. So that's definitely a relative term,
yeah,
bigger
you're
than,
right.
bigger than other artists, or however you may compare yourself. But yeah, that's amazing. So tell us about Back at It. That's your full length third from Zayde Wolf. So what can we expect from this?
Yeah, that's actually, Back at It is it's that's the
The
new
first
single
single,
that we just
right,
released. Yep.
right.
We've just sort of settled on a name for the new album, though. It's going to be called Neon Blood Type. So that's the new name coming out. It has like sort of like an underground meaning to it that I think we'll reveal a little bit as we go.
Right.
But yeah, Back at It is a really kind of a fun song. I wrote it like right as the first round of like quarantine happened, and my thought in my mind was, it's going to be really cool when we get to get back out and just like get doing stuff again, right? And so
Aw.
yeah, so I kind of wrote that for everybody, really, and kind of interwove some stories in there of fun things that we did kind of before all of this kind of went down, and there's some images in there of you know uh going out and having a drink with friends and stuff like that, so yeah, that's really what that one's about, and I think it's fun. It's not like a big heavy song like Gladiator or New Blood has been in the past. It's more like a really kind of upbeat pop song, but I think it's a lot of fun, and really kind of tells the story, or at least that point of time, and where I feel like we're getting closer and closer to being able to get back out and do some of that fun stuff. So
Right, right. Yeah, it's felt like that for a while, but it's starting to feel like that again. uh,
so true.
but yeah, so that's exciting. We're looking forward to it, and looking forward to discovering more what that neon blood type means.
Yeah.
So we'll be looking forward to that. But Zayd, man, you've had an incredible journey so far, and it sounds like you are more than catching your stride now, and you're doing it big time. So
Thank
congrats
you.
on all your success. Can you, we like to end the interview by asking, if you had one piece of advice for aspiring artists, what would it be?
Yeah, I think one of the main ones is, don't quit on what you're trying to do. But I think more than that, what I've learned, and this is still something I continue to learn, is like, be true to yourself and what you want to do. Make music that you love. Um, do that passionately over um, trying to fit in some box that maybe someone may be telling you to fit in, or you think that maybe you should fit in because all music is like this right now. Do what you love, because you'll always have a tremendous amount of satisfaction making music for yourself, like if you're doing it for something you love and based around something you love, and then collaborating with people that you care about and who care about you, who know how to push you, who know how to get great things out of you as your collaborator. So yeah, that's what I think. I think it's about, yeah, doing that. It's good stuff.